How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Yammy Noob. Today we're doing an episode of our beginner bike giveaway series, and this is possibly one of our most handsome beginner bikes we have available up for grabs as part of our sweepstakes. It is, of course, the Husqvarna Svartpilen 401. This is a really cool motorcycle, and I've got a lot to say about it. Before we get started, just want to let you guys know, got 5 motorcycles up for grabs this time around. So we've got the Svartpilen 401, we've got a Yamaha MT-03, a Suzuki SV650X, and 2 Honda Groms up for grabs. And of course, our Yamaha R1, which is part of our expert bike giveaway series. You can actually go to yammynoob.co right now, and you can bundle both together. So if you sign up as a Tier 1 and a Tier 1 on both the beginner and the expert bike giveaway series, you get them for $12 instead of $15 is total. So you get a discount if you sign up for both series, and that gets you entered to win all the motorcycles we have up for grabs right now. But the star of the show today is this Husqvarna Svartpilen 401. So what is this motorcycle? So this motorcycle is actually a KTM Duke 390 in disguise. Husqvarna has actually been out of the street motorcycle game for quite some time now. They basically have only focused on off-road motorcycles for a long time, and only recently did they come back out with the Svartpilen and the Vitpilen and the 401 and 701 platforms. Basically, those are KTM 390 and 690 platforms that have been kind of repackaged and reimagined for Husqvarna for their street motorcycles. These bikes are actually sort of unicorns here where I live in Texas and in America overall. I've only known of one other person who has owned a Svartpilen. This is actually only one of 2 that were up for sale within like a 500-mile radius of where I am here in Austin, Texas. So pretty difficult motorcycle to find. But luckily, because it's based on a KTM platform, you won't have any issues servicing this motorcycle. You can take this to any KTM dealership, and they will likely be able to help you because it's basically the same bike. So what do we got going on here? So again, this is a KTM Duke 390 basically, so it features the same 373cc liquid-cooled single-cylinder engine. The chassis is exactly the same, the frame is the same. The only couple of differences here, as you've noticed, are knobbly tires. So you've got the Pirelli Rally Scorpion STRs on here. This is a great tire. It's actually the tire I use on my desert sled. OEM equipment on the sled, which I've actually gone back to because they're great. Features an upside-down WP Apex 43mm fork, which is a great size for this motorcycle. And it's actually, if you can take a look up here, fully adjustable. So if you guys can see that on camera, it's got compression and rebound with a little twist knob, which is very interesting. It also features a fully adjustable monoshock as well for rebound and compression and for preload. So you've got preload, rebound, all kinds of adjustability on this bike. You've got wire wheels instead of the cast aluminum that is featured on the 390 as well, and a bunch of other little tiny details. You've got the headlight here, which is really unique to this motorcycle, that flat LED kind of cool looking thing. Looks aftermarket. I mean, this thing looks like a custom bike. It doesn't look like something you would buy off a showroom floor. It feels like something that you built yourself. I imagine if someone took a Duke 390 and they wanted to make it an urban scrambler like this thing, this is probably as close as you would get to it. So what does Husqvarna say about this thing? Husqvarna says that the Svartpilen is a progressive motorcycle imagined for rugged urban exploration. What does that mean? Well, let's jump aboard and find out. Starting up the Svartpilen here, you'll notice that it does not have the TFT display like the Duke has. This has a more traditional LCD display here, kind of reminiscent of my Ducati Scrambler. And we'll put it here in neutral. Start it up for you guys. If you've seen any of our Duke 390 videos, this exhaust sounds very familiar to you. Bone stock right now, brand new motorcycle. I do love the Husqvarna grips right here. That is pretty unique. All right, let's jump aboard and let's go have some fun. So the first thing you notice about the Svartpilen versus the Duke 390 is the seat height. This thing features a 32.9-inch seat height over the traditional 31.5, I think it is, that the Duke 390 is at. And, you know, the Duke 390 already had a pretty tall suspension for a beginner bike. Well, not tall suspension, rather a tall seat height for a beginner bike, in my opinion. So honestly, if you are considering a Svartpilen as your first motorcycle, which you definitely should, it's a great option. I think it falls right within the parameters of what I would recommend to a beginner. You should definitely take a seat on it because the seat height is quite tall. Now, this road right here is a little bit twisty, and I wanted to do this specifically to show you guys that even though this bike is on knobby tires, I am super familiar with these tires, and they grip extremely well for corners. There's really no issue taking corners at a fun, sensible pace on road with these tires. You're not going to feel like you're running up on the edges of grip on them or anything like that. It's a really fun motorcycle to ride around the twisties, given this more upright kind of supermoto-y stance that it has. We've caught up to a truck here, so we're gonna have to cook it back down. Given that this bike is truly Euro spec, it's actually in kilometers per hour right now, guys. So for all of my American viewers, we are not actually doing 60 miles per hour right now. We're doing 60 Ks an hour, which is more like 40, I think. I know that 60 kilometers, or I know that 100 kilometers per hour is 62 miles per hour, so that's the gauge I use in my mind. Why don't we try this though? Since this bike is all about urban exploration, let's jump over here, take some off-road with it. It's handling pretty okay, doing all right. And that's the kind of stuff you can do with this bike. One big thing that I want to note about this motorcycle is it's two things, right? So versus the KTM Duke 390, this bike actually has a much softer suspension setup, which for rugged urban exploration, which I don't really know what that means. Honestly, Husqvarna, I don't. You know, you can take potholes, you can take gravel, you can take some light kind of stuff, like we'll smash into this right here, and it doesn't really feel like much, whereas on a very stiff sport bike, man, that's not a lot of fun to take bumps. So this to me is a motorcycle that makes a ton of sense for someone who is looking for an urban commuter, like a very dense urban commuter kind of motorcycle. Man, this is it right here. It sits super narrow between the legs, so you can lane filter all day long. It makes the right amount of power for a super dense urban kind of bike. I'm thinking back to times that I've spent in São Paulo, Brazil, which is where I was born, actually, if you guys didn't know, and I've been back there many times. And, you know, it's one of those cities where I think like 10 million people or something live all within this cramped little space. And, you know, space is at a premium because so many people live in that area. And you'll never see a motorcycle bigger than 400-ish cc's because people just don't, there's really no point to owning them. I know that people do own bigger bikes down there, but boy, they're just so rare. So this to me is a motorcycle that makes a lot of sense for that kind of environment. But you might be asking me, Yemi, well then what's the point of owning the Svartpilen over a dual sport, right? A CRF 250L, a WR 250R, because what you're describing is basically that, right? You've got a punchy single cylinder engine, narrow between the legs, easy to maneuver, blah blah blah. That does sound like a dual sport situation to me, but honestly, this makes a lot of sense for perhaps the vertically challenged. The WR250R features a seat height of, I don't know, like 36 inches or something, which even for me with the 32-inch inseam, I don't think I can exactly flat foot a WR. I'd have to probably use the left foot down technique. And this gives you much more of a urban-focused motorcycle. And although I think dual sports do make great urban vehicles, they're not perfect either. They're extremely vibrational. They look a little ugly, let's be real, guys. Like, if you're very urban focused, you probably want a stylish motorcycle, which the Husqvarna delivers in spades. This is a very handsome little motorcycle that I would be so happy to be finding myself seated upon if I was heading down to my favorite downtown cafe or something like that, pandemic notwithstanding, of course. And it's a really interesting ride. The softer suspension setup and the taller seat does make me feel like I'm on a bit of a Scrambler style motorcycle, but to be honest, I like that. I like the fact that if I'm cruising around downtown, which is where this thing is supposed to live apparently, according to Husqvarna, that would make a lot of sense for me. I think that that would be a bike that I'd really enjoy spending time on, carving it up in an urban setting. But even when you get it out here to something more rural, maybe a hill country road or a canyon road, bone stock, I think you'll have tons of fun with it. I would not be super worried about the Pirelli Rally Scorpion STRs on this motorcycle, because this tire actually grips really well for a semi-knobbly tire. I think Pirelli defines this as a 60% on-road, 40% off-road tire, if I remember correctly. It is the standard equipment on the Yamaha Tenere 700 and the Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled. It was also featured, I believe, on the Tiger 900 that I rode in Morocco, the rally version. So it's a very capable off-road tire. I would not chuck it down any single tracks, but something tells me if you're looking at a Husqvarna Svartpilen, you're not super concerned about the single track ability of this motorcycle. Now, one thing I will say is, if you are thinking about getting this bike and you do want to try some gravel roads or fire roads, I say go for it, man. The only thing you have to look out for, and the only modification I'd recommend for you to do that with a little bit more confidence, is see if you can swap out KTM's Duke 390's exhaust onto this thing to give yourself a little bit more ground clearance. So we'll pull off over here and I'll show you what I'm talking about with this bike's ground clearance. Maybe we got a little spot over here. I'll pull off and show you guys, because I'm on a scrambly kind of bike. We can do this kind of stuff, doesn't matter. ABS kicking in, which kind of sucks. Well, let me show you guys what I mean. If we pull off here and take a look, right over here at the exhaust side of it, the Duke 390's exhaust actually routes up and out this way. It does not go down right here. And although Husqvarna has given you a cute little skid plate right here, it is not designed to do what you would like to do with it. So my recommendation would be, if you want this motorcycle and you do want to give yourself a little bit more ground clearance, you could totally reroute this exhaust here, gain yourself at least 2 inches right here, and a lot of clearance right here where you're going to encounter rocks and stuff. Because as it sits right now, boy, this is maybe like 5 or 6 inches of ground clearance. It's totally street biased. It's not enough. But with a simple modification to this exhaust system, you could gain yourself enough ground clearance to easily hop over curbs and stuff like that, which is actually something that this motorcycle would find itself doing. You would definitely find yourself jumping curbs and doing that kind of stuff with the Husqvarna Svartpilen 401. But yeah, even a bigger bump like this up here, I don't know if I would be super comfortable taking it on the Svartpilen, honestly. You know, something like a WR or my Desert Sled, man, I smash into curbs all day because I know I have the ground clearance for it. But this poor little bike, I don't think it deserves that kind of abuse. But again, I think a simple mod and you would get yourself a long way with it. These rallies hook up really well in silty conditions like that. I really like them. But yeah, stuff like this bike loves this kind of stuff, man. I mean, it's still a Duke 390. You can definitely hustle with this thing. Definitely have fun on your favorite twisty road. You can definitely learn with it too, you know. And again, because it features adjustable suspension, which is crazy for a little beginner bike like this, priced at, I don't know, $62.99, which is what this thing comes at, you're getting adjustable suspension. Now again, I do want to point out that at $62.99, which is what this thing is priced at, you start entering some interesting, you know, competitors for this thing. I think something like the Duke 390 is obviously a competitor to it, right? If you're looking at a single-cylinder beginner-style motorcycle, if you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of the punch and go juice that the Svartpilen has, you know, CRF 250L, I know it's not exactly the same thing, but it's going to give you a lot of the same kind of vibes. A lot of the same kind of vibes. But again, I think if you're very specifically looking for the urban dweller motorcycle, I mean, this is the one to get. It looks so cool. Anyways, the perennial question people ask as well, what is the Husqvarna and these little bikes like on the highway? Guys, they are totally fine on the highway. No problem at all. taking these little bikes up to 60, 70 miles per hour. They do just fine. Now, one thing I will say that I don't like about this motorcycle, and I've already noticed on it, is neutral is so difficult to find on it, man. Like, look at this. I'm trying to go into neutral, right? I'm already kind of stuck in first gear, second gear. Come on, where's neutral? Nope, that's first. There we go. There's neutral. And I think it's just the fact that this bike is still breaking in. It's still kind of new. So I think the transmission just needs a little bit of time to bed in a little bit. But neutral is very, very difficult to find on this motorcycle so far in the 64 kilometers that I've put on it. So not a whole lot of mileage on it. It's probably going to need some more time to settle in. But it is a little difficult to find. Now let's see about some power buildup here. Trying to merge onto this highway. Easily past this Prius, making our way up to the Tacoma up there. No, it's a 4Runner, whatever the hell. Oh, look at that. So again, guys, don't worry about power. This thing's got plenty of poke. I think it's like 48 horsepower and 27 foot-pounds of torque. Plenty to have fun with. Very, very approachable power for a beginner as well, so no worries there. Going down the highway here, this is I love the way this bike sits. It's so unique. It's like a little twig between the legs. It really does feel a little twig between the legs. Well, that's, I just said that, whoops. I just love how, you know, the seat and the thin little seat right here, I just love how thin the seat and the gas tank is. It really does remind me of being on a 250 dual sport or even a DRZ 400 or something like that. It definitely has that kind of vibe to me. It is a very, very narrow seating position right here, and it makes you want to play around with it. But the way it wants you to play around is so different than its, you know, cousin, the Duke 390. The Duke 390, boy, I just cannot find neutral on this bike. I'm trying everything, guys. Where is it? Oh, there it is. The Duke 390, you know, has that kind of supermoto flavor to it and feel, and so you want to play around with it. And one feature that I wish this bike had that the Duke has is the supermoto mode, because if this thing is for rugged urban exploration, as Husqvarna says, I would love to disable the rear ABS. Let me slide the rear around, let me play around with it a little bit. But as it sits right now, I think the only way to do that is to pull the fuse for the ABS, which is not ideal, because there are some situations you want to keep the ABS on, and there's plenty of others where you'd want to turn it off. So it's nice to have on the Duke the ability to turn it off and on, and I think this bike specifically, if it's for all that rugged exploration, you should definitely have it as well. But overall, this is a really cool motorcycle. I'm really enjoying spending time with it. I think the suspension is a huge step up over the Duke. It's just more supple, more compliant, and the best part is, even if it wasn't, you can dial it in because it's adjustable. Now, is it, you know, an Öhlins front end and a TTX rear? Is it some crazy off-road suspension? Is it some closed cartridge system? No, of course not, guys. This is still a $6,300 motorcycle. It's not going to have amazing suspension, but the fact that you can dial a little bit in and play around with it and really tweak it is great. It gives it a little bit more growing into room. It gives it a little bit more room to grow into than your traditional beginner bikes. And, you know, it comes at a bit of a premium, so I think if you are shopping for maybe like a Scrambler as your first bike, a Ducati Scrambler, maybe, you know, in that $6,000 to $8,000 range for your very first motorcycle, maybe you're privileged enough, or you've saved enough, or you want to spend that much on your first, it's a great option, man. I do think, however, though, for the price point, as a street-biased motorcycle, it is down on power a little bit. It's a little spicy to pay, you know, $6,300 before tax, title, license, and everything else for 48 horsepower. That's pretty tough. But again, horsepower is not everything. Definitely not. I'm enjoying my experience with the Husqvarna here. It's a nice motorcycle to sit on, and I think some of the intangibles that it's providing me are definitely worth that premium. A couple of things that I would hope that Husqvarna had done differently, or I would like to change myself. These mirrors do look a little cheap. They look like, I don't know, the most bargain basement mirrors you've ever seen. And maybe it's trying to do something with that retro styling. Maybe it's trying to, you know, give you the nice round mirrors like it's like a retro bike or something, but it's a little not so great. I would have also, personally, my own opinion, would have loved to have seen the KTM TFT on here, but with a Husqvarna rejiggering of it, like a Husqvarna kind of branded TFT instead of the KTM one. That would have been very cool, and I would have liked to see that. But then again, who knows? Maybe that would have shot up the price of this motorcycle to $7,000. But maybe they could have skipped out on the aluminum triple tree up here with the Svartpilen logo embossed into it, or the little stitchings. But then again, you're like, well, what do I want out of this bike? Do I want those little features and touches? Because it is a great looking motorcycle, that's undeniable. And maybe all those little touches add up to that great looking motorcycle design that it has. I don't know. Either way, this is a super fun motorcycle. The chassis on it is wonderful, just like that Duke 390, very playful, very fun motorcycle to ride. It doesn't feel as serious as something like an MT-03 or an Ninja 400. It's just a little bit different, you know? And again, with the knobbies, the wire wheels, the adjustable suspension, you're getting a lot of bang for your buck here, honestly. I think, you know, if you can find one of these and you're willing to spend the coin, it's a super cool bike to own as your first. Really, really attention grabbing. You are definitely going to get some comments about this thing because it is just so striking looking, you know? It looks like a custom bike that someone made.
Hey, thanks for watching the video. Why don't you click this one right over here and you can keep watching some more of your sweet Papa Yam. Maybe this one will have fun memes in it. Maybe it'll be interesting. Maybe I crash a motorcycle. Who can say? Maybe you should click and find out.